And this is going to be a little bit of a dense section, so hopefully I can explain everything well enough. If I don't, obviously leave me a comment. I would love to make corrections if they are necessary. And also I want to make sure that everything I'm explaining is done in a way that is accessible to as many people as possible. So if you feel I'm not doing that, please let me know, and I will take your commentary to heart and do better next time. So I want to talk about the difference between private solutions and public solutions. So from a macroeconomic perspective, which is to say, looking at the economy as a large, from a heightened view. So like looking at a national economy or looking at the economy of a state or something like that, is instead of a smaller way. So macroeconomically, we have divided up the things that we need to survive into public goods and private goods. And we have tended in the last 40 years or so, pretty much since the death of the New Deal, to favor these private solutions. It's an ideology called neoliberalism, where essentially you take systemic problems and you privatize the solution so that individual entities or organizations can profit off of that in maintenance and furtherance of the capitalist economic model, which of course concentrates, is meant to concentrate wealth in the hands of entrepreneurs who are deemed to be rewarded for their ability to innovate with the economy, keep the economy moving, and things like that. So just a basic background. So what is a private solution? So essentially a private solution says that we have a problem, and in order for that problem to best be resolved, it makes sense for an individual or a group of individuals to attempt to compete with other individuals or groups of individuals in order to, create a solution to the problem. Say, for example, the problem is there aren't good enough sandals. The sandals that are being made right now don't provide enough ventilation. People are getting foot funguses. It's just not nice, right? So one of the ways that you can solve this problem is to say that it is essentially to say from a theoretical perspective that, well, because the sandals that are currently being manufactured are not serving people well, at some point someone's going to come along with a sandal design that actually solves the problem that of the ventilation and the foot fungus, and they will start to sell a sandal like this. And because this sandal solves the problem that so many other sandals don't resolve, people will change their behavior and buy this new sandal because it solves the problem that they were having before with ventilation and foot fungus, right? That's a private solution to a problem. And obviously I just made all that up, but you get the general idea, right? These private solutions are typically best done for things that don't really have too much effect on, whether individuals live or die and stuff like that. Whereas a public solution, let's say a large scale problem. Evictions. It's totally unrelated. I'm not taking this from an earlier story or anything. So say, there's a pandemic going on, and all these people are, they lost their jobs because all these places had to close down for quarantine, and we decide that we're going to stop people from getting evicted. And then for some reason, we are going to let that expire. And, we say to people, well, we are going to, instead of making it so, back rent or whatever isn't a thing, and we just kind of wipe the slate clean and people can start over, we're going to say, well, we're going to say that, oh, we'll give you some resource to help you fight your eviction claim. So in that situation, I've given you two examples. So the public solution would be saying, hey, actually, we're just going to wipe the slate clean, right? We're going to say that there is no back rent. We're going to say that the property taxes that were due during that time are nullified. We are going to provide enough money to the banks so that they can nullify the mortgage payments that were due, right? You just eliminate all the portions of the chain that were causing the problem And the reason this is a public solution is because you're using a collectivized decision-making unit to execute the problem, right? To get rid of the problem. It's also a preventative one, but that's a little different. So in my other example, which is the state paying for lawyers for people who need evictions, this is also a public solution. You get to a point where you recognize that individuals are going to be in a difficult place if the collective body, typically the government, is not able to create some sort of solution. So the solution becomes, hey, we're actually going to pay for lawyers for all these people who are getting evicted. Now, I would argue that this is a reactive solution, but it's still a public solution because on a macroeconomic scale, the organization, the public entity, the government, who is making decisions about what a solution might be and executing those solutions for a problem, whether it's a public problem or a private problem, right? So that's the difference between public and private solutions. So essentially, oftentimes in neoliberalism and in late stage capitalism, as it were right now, we are kind of propagandized is not the right term, but it's pretty adjacent to what I'm talking about. To think about, every time there's a problem, there should be a private solution. Climate change is actually a really great example of this, right? We're trying to rely on private companies to come up with tech that is going to, help save us from climate change. We're relying on the actions of individual people. These are also private solutions, right? To say to people, hey, you should recycle more. You shouldn't use plastic straws. You should use this. You should do that. To individuals, that is a private solution, not because private individuals are profiting off it, but because private individuals are changing their behavior. Whereas a public solution is either going to have a large organization, usually a government, go forth and create a solution, or they're going to just say that actually instead of requiring individuals to do something, we as a collective are going to do something, change our collective behavior as a government or nation state or whatever in order to solve the problem. So there's kind of two prongs of each different type. So the reason I wanted to talk about this was because, as we move forward and we start to see more issues come up, I think we should be aware of the types of messaging that we're getting from people who are invested in the system as it is now, which is to say, what can you do to solve blank, instead of, or how can people innovate out of blank crisis? Where we should be thinking about, what can the government do for us? What can we do as a collective to solve the problem? Because oftentimes, especially for these larger problems, it is going to take collective action in order to make sure that we get out of these crises in a way that is inherently positive for everyone involved, whereas private solutions not only typically don't work for large-scale problems, but also, even if they do work, it again concentrates the wealth. It concentrates the wealth gained from that in the hands of a very small number of people, who then are able to exploit us for our inability to adapt without them, right? So they use their innovation, their power, because they own the private solution. And depending on how available the private solution is, they can create winners and losers, because at the end of the day, it's their product, they own it, and they can decide how it's sold, who it's sold to, how much it's sold for, and what have you. And this is especially problematic where there are issues that affect large communities, and especially when some of those large communities don't have a ton of resources, because you start to reinforce the inequities that we have seen that come from a variety of different issues. So as we go through our daily lives, as we realize large collective problems, as we see the types of issues that we're facing as a community, either in your community or other communities, just think about the types of solutions that are being offered for these problems, and think about whether it makes sense to have a public solution or a private solution for the thing that you are experiencing. I would argue, from my personal perspective as a socialist, that most of the time, many of the problems that we have are going to be best solved with public solutions. But I'm sure there are arguments out there for why some public problems should be resolved by private actors. But my bias, as it were, is to see public solutions for these problems, because I think it is easiest to move forward with something and to bring everyone with you when there's collective action, collective decision making, and collective resource use for the solving of a particular problem. So anyway, I hope this was enlightening as to what the difference between private solutions and public solutions are, what neoliberalism is, how it works in hand with late-stage capitalism, and gives you an understanding of what to look for either in the media or just even when you're talking to people about what their biases are about, how communities solve problems.